Tales from the Ribble Valley by Cornelius McManus and George Hull. The Magistrate. Our way lies where a turbulent stream, after turning a large and heavy wheel, rushes madly to disturb the more placid waters of the Ribble. The water wheel is old and green, and the waters career noisily over it, as if grudging the labour required to turn such an antique and cumbrous piece of machinery. The shed that stands by the side of the waters is by day the scene of busy work. Its owner combines the trades of a wheelwright and a carpenter. He alleges that every wooden article required by man, from his cradle to his coffin, can be made at this establishment. The carts built here can traverse intact the rough roads that lie between here and Preston, can mount the Longridge fells, or cross the treacherous fords in the higher reaches of the Ribble. Nothing more be could said in their favour, and when we say that this good workmanship is only one sample of the thoroughness of Dan Wilding's work, we shall readily be believed when we add that to his workshop comes all the orders for anything made of wood required by anyone in the district. At night, however, the scene is changed. Business gives place to pleasure. Dan Wilding's workmen, with one or two of the village cronies, meet together in the spacious shed and talk or sing or argue the evening away. Many a grave political or social dispute, such as will occur in important districts like this, has been settled within the wooden walls of Dan's shop, and the steps of many an accomplished rustic dancer have first moved to musical motion here amongst the shavings. I'll tell you what, chaps, I'm none so fond of young keeper as they are getting at the hall, said Dick Drawford. No, me neither, remarked another young man, seating himself upon the low bench. He looks at you when he meets you, as if he wondered whether you were going a poaching or coming back from it. He's a surly-looking chap. He'll never be well thought on while he stops, said Dick. The other members of the company agreed with these conclusions. None of them liked the new gamekeeper, who was such a different man in disposition from his jovial and neighbourly predecessor. The little gathering had lacked a subject for conversation upon this particular evening. The desultory remark in which Dick Drawford expressed his disapproval of their neighbour the gamekeeper supplied the deficiency, and if the keeper had only been listening in the vicinity of the shed, he would have shared the proverbial fate of all listeners, for he would have heard nothing good of himself. I tell you what, said Dick, I wish we could have a bit of fun out of that keeper. Could we not frighten him some road? He brags as now of frighten him. If me feyther had been living, there'd have been some game, remarked another. He once made up a ghost and put it in Newt on Thowd Lane, aside of Ribchester, and for a full week nobody dared pass it. It were talk at parish for many a month. Aye, I recollect it, said another. It were just after the owd woman were murdered, out and warm, and folks' nerves were a bit upset. It was unanimously decided that a lark at the expense of the unpopular gamekeeper would be a desirable variation of the colourless life of a country village. The House, therefore, resolved itself into a committee of ways and means to decide in what manner the resolution was to be practically carried out. To report the debate with its numerous interjections and frequent personalities would be nearly impossible and entirely useless. In the end a logical decision was arrived at. Dick Drawford, being a noted scarecrow builder, for he possessed a reputation as a constructor of those hideous guardians of the orchard and cornfield, was deputed to make the projected boggart. I don't know as I can, said Dick. I'm no but used to them sort as frightens throstles and crows. What'll frighten a crow'll frighten a keeper, said another of the committee. Well, this keeper's knowing someone like a crow roosting yon in th' middle at wood, added Dick. Various suggestions were made by other members of the company. Some wanted fireworks, to add piquancy to the infernal nature of the boggart, and all were highly elated at the prospect of such a great practical joke. Of course, every member of the committee was pledged to secrecy. Amongst young men of their age, a high code of honour frequently exists, and to break a solemn promise of this sort is to bring down upon oneself a lasting disgrace. Anyhow, the boggart was finished. Night had fallen, and the moon was struggling to peep through a mass of inky clouds, when 4 village youths, carrying a cumbrous parcel, left the high road and struck across into the wood. Walking in Indian file, they passed down to the bank of the Ribble. The water was very low, and thus the party were enabled to walk along the shingles below the bank of the stream. Had this not been possible, it is doubtful whether they could have found their way to that thickness of the forest in which was the keeper's lonely home. We confess our inability to see why all this trouble was taken. The village lads, however, with the spirit of mischief strong in them, looked at the affair in a different light. They evidently were quite sure that this midnight game was worth the candle. They found the path rough and the burden heavy, no doubt, but the spectacle of the horror of the keeper when he emerged from his lonely hut and met his terrible visitor would amply repay them for all their trouble. They were all quite sure that the gamekeeper was superstitious. They did not take his double-barrelled gun into the reckoning, nor did they suppose that a charge of small shot might possibly put an end to the evening's amusement. When the keeper's cottage was reached, the real lark was only just begun. The great requirement now was absence of noise. A cough, a whisper, or the cracking of a twig under the foot might have ruined the whole affair. We will spare our readers' nerves, and will not inflict upon them a description of the boggart as it stood. Suffice it to say that it reflected all the ideas of the horrible which were possessed by these 4 young men combined. Set up in that lonely place, it would have startled the coolest sceptic, and gamekeepers as a class are not always cool and not often sceptical. Dick Drawford was beginning to drape the ghastly figure when his arm was violently seized, and "Now, chaps, what's your business here?" rang through the cool night air. In a moment Dick's 3 companions were likewise seized from behind, and then the rough voice of the keeper inquired, "What are you doing here, I asked you?" We're not but having a bit of game," faltered Dick. "A bit of game? I'm glad you'll own it. Is it ground game or birds you're after tonight?" No, it's only a lark," said Dick. "A lark? Poachers don't go after larks. I suppose it's a pheasant you mean," said the keeper with a laugh. "We're not poaching, I'll assure you," said another of the surprised party. "Oh dear, a likely tale. What else could bring you here at this time of night?" We were putting a bit of a boggart up. It's here," said Dick, holding up the scarecrow. "Oh yeah, I understand you. You just match a man I once knew that was always taking important letters to the hall, and another that had a habit of losing his way, accidentally of course, every time he went out for a walk. He was a stranger, after he'd been 5 years in the district, but they were all your sort, they were all poachers." "We're not poachers, I can assure you, Gaffer. We all work at Dan Wilding's, the wheel reeks." "That may be so. If you try to make a magistrate believe that, I'm afraid it'll go harder than ever with you. Have you chaps there got hold of his accomplices?" The 3 watchers who had Dick's companions in custody brought their prisoners up, and all listened to what the gamekeeper and his assistants had to say. "Now, we've catched you fairly this time. We have been watching you ever since those chaps were set there, between that little plantation and river," said one of the watchers. "Aye," said the gamekeeper. "I dare say you thought you would have me fast in the house here while you took up your spoil. I'm not a bragging chap, but I think that the diamond has cut the diamond this time." "We ain't fairly letting ourselves in this time," said Dick. "Well, you've had a long run. Several thousand head of game of one kind or another have been taken lately." "But we're not taking 'em. We're no need. We're all in regular work at joinery," said Dick. "Aye, of course, I know you're all innocent. I think we've summoned nearly all the innocent people there are in the country. If I were to let you chaps go home now, you would soon bring evidence to prove that you were never in this wood at all tonight. You would get half a dozen of your friends to swear at court that you were all sound asleep in your beds before 9 o'clock tonight. We should never try now to sort 'em. We own to being here, but we're here for an innocent purpose. Oh, aye, when I was at my last situation in the south, we found a man hidden in the plate closet one night. Of course, he was there for an innocent purpose, he said so himself. I think the judge didn't hear him, though, or of course he would have let him go instead of giving him 5 years. You'll not summon us, will you?" Dick asked tremulously. "No, I'll just keep you while I've got you. I'll not let you go to collect false evidence. There's a magistrate just now staying at Thal, and I'll bring you all before him this very night. If you can persuade him to let you off, well and good. You'd better bring that boggart with you. Maybe his worship will believe that you came into the wood at dead of night just to put that up." The gamekeeper said these last words in such a sarcastic manner that the 4 prisoners at once saw that this piece of evidence would go against them rather than in favour of them. But off to the hall they had to go, and they did not take with them out of the wood the same high spirits they had brought into it. The gamekeeper avoided the main avenue and led his captives round to the back of the house. There they were admitted by a side door. Dick and his companions were surprised to find the house so much alive at this time of night. They had certainly hoped that the magistrate would be in bed, and that they would have escaped, for this night at least. "Is Mr. Clark in his room?" asked the keeper. "Yes," answered one of the servants. "Shall I call him?" Mr. Clark was not the master of the house. He was a visitor, the J.P. of whom the gamekeeper had spoken. The owner of the hall seldom comes there, excepting just in the shooting season. Then he comes and goes at irregular intervals, and no one in the district ever knows for certain whether the squire is at home or not. He comes without notice, brings perhaps 1 or 2 friends from town, stays a few days, and then as suddenly disappears, to return perhaps at the end of 6 or 7 months. "What's the charge against these men?" asked Mr. Clark. "Night poaching, sir. I caught them at it in the wood about a 1/4 mile away from here." Mr. Clark sat in an easy chair at the head of a long table. At the right of this table the keeper stood while giving his evidence, and at the lower end, opposite to the magisterial chair, stood the prisoners. One of the game watchers kept the door of the room. On the table were some books, very likely various useful books of law, to which Mr. Clark made reference during the hearing of the case. "What is the evidence?" asked Mr. Clark. "Well, your worship, there's been a deal of game taken lately. I suspected these men, but haven't been able to get at them till tonight. About half an hour ago I saw them leave the high road, cross preserved lands, and go in the direction of some snares that were set during last night. On the way they stopped opposite the door of my hut. They appeared to be holding a consultation about me. I had no doubt that they intended to employ violence against me if they could find me, so I got those watchers together and pounced on the prisoners. I arrested them and brought them right up here. If your worship will order a remand, we can have the prisoners searched, as they may have some poaching implements about them." "You can search us now," said Dick Drawford. "Hold your tongue," peremptorily commanded Mr. Clark, who had evidently not been a magistrate long, and was burning to vindicate the majesty of the law. "If the facts are as this witness says, no remand is necessary. The case is clear enough without any further proof. What have you to say to clear yourself from this charge?" Being now permitted to speak, Dick commenced to tell the story of the boggart. At its recital the gamekeeper smiled incredulously. Dick had got far enough to deny any knowledge of the snares or of the person who set them, and to assert that he and his companions were simply bent upon a practical joke, when Mr. Clark interrupted him. "That's an old tale. We've heard it scores and scores of times. Have you nothing but that to tell us? It's gospel truth, that's all as can say. Have any of you other prisoners anything to say for yourselves? The other prisoners thus addressed muttered their inability to vary the statement of their spokesman, Dick Drawford. Mr. Clark closed his boot with a bang. I believe you to be a most dangerous gang of ruffians, he said. This part of the country is infested with poachers, and I feel it to be my duty to make an example of you. I therefore sentence every one of you to be imprisoned in Preston jail for 6 months. But, sir, Dick was beginning. Silence, exclaimed Mr. Clark. Then, turning to the gamekeeper, he told him to keep the men in safe custody all night. Then he was to get sufficient assistance from the county police to remove the prisoners to Preston, there to serve the term of imprisonment to which they had been sentenced. Grumbling at this hole-and-corner manner of administering injustice, the unfortunate men were led off down a long passage. At the end of the passage was an open door. Through this door blew the cool air of heaven, an air that surely never seemed so sweet to Dick and his friends as now, when they were likely to lose it for a time. You needn't grumble, chaps, you brought all this on yourselves, said one of the game watchers to the prisoners. We're as innocent as lambs, said Dick. Are you sure? The gamekeeper asked, smiling. We are for sure, exclaimed Dick energetically but mournfully. Well, how do you fancy your 6 months? It's too bad, said Dick. Well, but you see how it might have been. You were caught in the wood, your story wasn't believed, and if Mr. Clark had been a real magistrate, you would have been off to Preston in the morning. What don't you mean? Asked Dick eagerly. I mean just this, said the keeper, taking Dick by the buttonhole of his coat and earnestly addressing him. There's an old saying that the frighteners generally get frightened. Next time you construct a boggart to terrify a sulky keeper, just you take care that the sulky keeper is not behind the wall listening to all you say. I have as good a right to play a joke as you have. I am not afraid of ghosts. If I had met a hideous thing like that you were setting up, I should have sent a charge of shot through it, and another into the bushes where its owner was hiding, waiting to see the fun. But 6 months is too bad, began Dick. Don't I tell you there's no 6 months about it? Mr. Clark is no magistrate, and if you hadn't been fools you would have seen it. He's the butler from the master's London house. This beautiful joke is of his own inventing, not mine, but if you don't mind your own business and leave me alone, I may joke with you yet. As he said these words, the keeper shifted his gun from one hand into the other in a menacing manner. Then he continued, Now, you see that door? Well, good night, the 4 of you. I'll see you down the avenue, though, and his worship will no doubt wave his handkerchief from the front steps. Now, if I were you, I would remember, every one of you, that a joke is a joke when both sides enjoy it. You enjoyed it first, I am enjoying it now, and if it were not so late at night, I would ask you to a bite and sup just to keep the fun going. If the departing guests heard a loud laugh behind them as they left the house, perhaps they also enjoyed it, and inwardly blessed the magistrate.